I was standing at the Justice for All table at an outreach in Texas, and a pro-life student approached me. And he was very passionate. He was just venting his frustrations about abortion. And I'm trying to validate his concerns and give him some encouragement. Meanwhile, in the corner of my eye, I see a student standing at the yes side of our poll table. It was across from us. And I feel her staring at me. Now, I am trying to make sure that I don't say the wrong thing at the wrong time in the wrong context to the student who I'm talking to. And then she walks over, and she asks us what we're doing here. I introduce myself, and I tell her that we're here to have productive conversations about abortion. I think it's really important to talk about, and I want to hear what you think about it. She says, well, I don't like abortion, but I think it needs to be legal because kids are going to suffer in foster care. Now, this is a very common thing that I hear from a lot of students on many different campuses, and maybe you have too. But with this student, it was different, because by the time she finished her sentence, there were tears streaming down her face. I knew I needed to get her out of the mix of the commotion, so I invited her to sit down with me on the bench on the periphery of our exhibit, and I asked her to share her story, why this was so heavy for her. She said, when I was in middle school, my friend died in foster care. At that moment, I knew that I needed to throw everything that I had planned for this conversation out the window and move the pro-life arguments to the side for the moment, because I needed to listen to her story and hear where she was coming from. At that moment, this student did not need an abortion argument or pro-life argument, right? What she needed was a friend. Now, this segment is called How to Talk About Abortion. I know you guys are eager to hear good pro-life arguments. And I'm going to share a very helpful tool with you for your abortion conversations, but first, if we don't precede our arguments and nourish them with a posture of love, then we're going to miss a gift that we can give this person who's standing right in front of us. A few days ago, the student and I, we kept on talking, and it was like a 2-hour conversation, which is kind of crazy. When you're doing outreach, it's amazing how long people are willing to stay when they thought they were only going to stop by for just a minute. And we built a friendship, and I got to know her. I talked about my faith. I asked her about her own background. We shared our stories, and actually, a few days ago, I asked her what her current view on abortion is, and she said, I think I would call myself pro-life now, but I really understand why women feel like they need abortion. She also told me that she plans to watch this live stream, so that's really cool. I think her words are something that we should all reflect on, right? That we can understand how hard this is for women, because abortion is clearly wrong, right? And we all know that it should be illegal. But can we step out of ourselves for a moment and just think about what it must feel like to be hopeless, fearful, alone while pregnant? This is what we need to keep in mind as we are in our abortion conversations. I was at a different campus in Oklahoma, and I was talking to a student who approached me. She was a passionate student. She said, we need taxpayer-funded abortions through all 9 months of pregnancy because low-income women can't afford them. Now, I had this inkling within me that I needed to hold off from challenging her. Again, this is a common thing in my conversations. And I decided to ask her what she was studying. What's your major? She introduced herself to me, and she said that she's an artist, and she's studying art. And I asked her what her favorite medium was, what current project she's working on. And I am telling you, as soon as she started talking about that, her eyes lit up, and there was a smile gleaming from her face mask. I decided to move to the grass so we can continue talking away from the noise of the campus. And she continued to share her concerns with me about low-income women. But before I challenged her on anything she said, I was intentional to point out the things we agree on. I told her, I agree with you that poverty is a very difficult situation. I can't imagine what it must feel like to be pregnant in that circumstance. Eventually, we were discussing the question, what are the unborn? Are the unborn human beings? Because if they're not, then abortion might not matter. And if they are human beings, well, that really does matter, right? And so we're playing ping pong and dialogue, talking about the biology, the philosophy. And at some point, though, it felt like we had reached an impasse in our conversation. I don't mean that it felt like we were talking past each other, but it felt like there was this wall preventing us from moving forward because there was just something that prevented her from keeping on going. So I decided to ask her, do you think your life has value? Tears welled up in her eyes, and she said, honestly, I don't. Some people cannot see the value of the unborn because they don't see the value within themselves. And I think we really need to keep that in mind in our conversations. The pro-life advocate is faced with two distinct challenges in every abortion conversation. The pro-choice advocate is faced with one. We already know that pro-choice advocates are concerned about women in poverty, foster care, single mothers, and sexual assault survivors. They don't need to convince us of this. If they want to change our minds, they only have one objective to meet. All they need to do is prove to us that the unborn aren't human, right? But since the culture's current perception of pro-life people is that we don't care about babies after they're born, not only do we need to demonstrate that the unborn are human, we need to demonstrate that we are human. That we care about women who are suffering, children who are suffering, and the person who's standing right in front of us who might be suffering too. So how do we do that? Well, to start, we need to take the time to point out the things we agree on. We need to find common ground when possible. When a student tells me that they're concerned about low-income women or poverty, the first thing that comes out of my mouth is not, here's a solution. It's, I am too. But to find common ground, we have to be actively listening to the person that we're talking to, right? Now, I don't mean that we should just be holding our tongues long enough to let her finish talking so we can refute her. I mean we need to be genuinely trying to hear where she's coming from. I want you to think of the best listener you know, the person who makes you feel most understood. I want you to reflect on what it is that they do that makes you feel this way. And I actually want you to jot down one of those qualities in your notes. I know you have a smartphone, you can pull out your notes app right now and put it in there. I'll give you a moment to do that. Just one quality that makes you feel heard. My challenge for you is to mirror these qualities in every single one of your abortion conversations, because people will start to listen once they feel heard. So my challenge for you today isn't to become the best debater you know, it's to become the best listener you know. Which is a little counterintuitive, isn't it? Now, to listen to people's concerns, we have to be asking good questions. I frequently ask questions like, to clarify what a person believes and why they believe it. Questions like, do you think sex-selective abortion should be legal? Do you think abortion should be legal through all 9 months of pregnancy or only up until a certain point? How long have you had your pro-choice view? When did you become pro-choice? Another question I like is one that my coworker Jeremy Gore shared with me. It asks, why do you think people are pro-life? I was at Wichita State University last year, and I met a student who identified as pro-choice through all 9 months of pregnancy. Now, how many of you, when you hear that, think to yourselves, uh-oh, this person believes something totally different from me? I know I did. Well, I dug a little deeper and asked her some questions, and I found out what she meant by pro-choice. She said that she believes all elective abortions should be illegal. What? It's only in the cases of life of the mother that she believes a woman should be able to choose what to do. Had I not asked her questions, I would have assumed that she believes abortions because of poverty, foster care, or rape should be legal. Instead, we actually had the same belief in those cases. We just had different definitions of the terms we used to label ourselves. So never assume, always ask. The more people I talk to, the more convinced I become that behind every passionate person or statement is a story. When we walk into our conversations, especially with a stranger, we are at a disadvantage because we have no idea what this person has been through. We don't know if she's had an abortion. We don't know if she's currently pregnant. We don't know if she's been raped. We need to gently ask this person questions that help her feel comfortable sharing that information with us if she wants to. Now, I never directly ask someone, have you had an abortion? But I will ask her, do you know someone who's had an abortion? And sometimes this person will open up. So by asking questions with an open heart, listening to understand, and finding common ground when possible, we can civilize the dialogue and show students that we truly care about what they have to say. Not just what we want to say, right? We care about what they have to say. It also allows us to maneuver more skillfully in the conversation when we challenge them, because we're no longer assuming they believe a million things that they might not actually believe. Now, I know you all want to hear about how to challenge someone, so I'm going to get there. But before we challenge someone, we need to keep in mind that there is a challenge for you. We need to show concern for the woman who's pregnant, for the unborn child, and the person who's standing in front of us. Okay, now a lot of people bring up all sorts of reasons for their pro-choice position. Just to name a few. Abuse, it's a lump of tissue. Stop pushing your religion. Some of these justifications argue that the unborn are not human. At least they're on topic. Others are off topic because they don't address the question at all, like the ones on the right. They merely assume the unborn aren't human within their statement. So how can we refocus the conversation back onto the question, what are the unborn? As Scott Klusendorf says, trot out the toddler. Use these 4 steps. Agree the circumstance is difficult. Apply the justification to a born human. Ask why the circumstance doesn't justify killing a born human. And the final step is, ah. Now, this is not what you actually should say in conversation. It's a mental ah. This is clarifying the central question. It's a light bulb moment, tying the 2 scenarios together, bringing you back to that question, what are the unborn? So I'm going to invite Steve Wagner up here. He's the executive director of Justice for All, and we're going to role play a skit using these 4 steps in conversation. So Steve is going to be pro-life.
Hey.
And I'm going to play a pro-choice student.
I need my most important tool for conversation, which is my clicker, so I can direct you to your next statement.
Wonderful, Steve.
Okay. Just kidding.
I think abortion should be legal because women are in poverty and they're going to suffer without it.
Well, I'm really glad that you brought that up, because the issue of abortion is really difficult for those women who are in poverty. And that's one of the most common reasons for abortion is women saying, I don't have the ability, I can't afford this child. Thousands and thousands and thousands of women are dealing with that, and just trying to figure out how to care for themselves, and then they find that they're pregnant, and that's just overwhelming.
Yeah, and I actually know people who have been through that, and I can't imagine if they had to take care of another child.
It's true. And there isn't a simple, easy solution to that. I think we've got to try to give those women the best care that we can.
So do you think it should be legal then?
Well, that's an interesting question. Let me ask you a different question that might seem off the topic, but I think it might help our conversation. Imagine that I had a 2-year-old here, and his mother is very poor. She can't even care for herself. And then she has to try to care for this 2-year-old. Do you think she should be able to kill the 2-year-old?
Well, no, you can't kill a 2-year-old. That's obvious.
Right, and that's what I thought you would say. And that's what I think too. You obviously can't kill 2-year-olds. I'm curious if we agree on the reason why you can't kill 2-year-olds. Why do you think we can't kill 2-year-olds?
Well, I mean, that's a human being. You can't kill human beings.
I agree. So if the unborn turned out to be a human, just like that 2-year-old, could we agree that we should protect the unborn just like we protect that 2-year-old?
I see what you're trying to say. But what if a woman's raped? Like, I guarantee you there are women around us on this campus who have been raped, and I don't think that you as a man can tell her that she should be forced to give birth.
Yeah, I think that's a really important circumstance. And it is affecting thousands of women. Now, some people will downplay the circumstance of rape because they'll say, well, only about 1.5% of abortions have to do with rape and incest. But I think of that a different way. That's 14,000 women a year, and that number represents 14,000 individual stories of women who have been victimized by rape, and now they find themselves pregnant, and then they're trying to figure out what to do. The number is actually larger than 14,000. That's just the number that end up getting an abortion.
Oh, yeah, that's a really big number. I have friends who have been through that, and it's so tragic.
We really need to, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
It's okay. I guess,
It is tragic.
do you think that it should be legal, at least in the case of rape?
Well, I think it's a really difficult circumstance. Here's how I think through that circumstance. Imagine that there are two women, and both of them have been victims of rape, but one of them is about 6 weeks pregnant with the product of rape, and the other one has just given birth, and she is holding an infant who is a product of rape in her hands. Now, do you think the woman who has the product of rape in her hands should be able to kill this infant?
Well, no, she can't do that.
Right, so it's similar to our other the part of our conversation, right? If you can't kill the infant, why is that?
Well, it's because that's a
human.
human being, but that's so different. It's like comparing apples to oranges. Like, obviously a fetus or whatever is part of the human species, but they're, how do I say this? It's like they're human, but they're not, I don't know, human. Does that make sense? Like, they're not the same as us.
Yeah, it does make sense what you're saying. I mean, if you look at pictures, if you look at pictures of the unborn, they are very different from us early on, aren't they? Mm-hmm. And so it makes sense to me that you would point out those differences. And I think part of the point here with the question of rape is it seems like you and I don't disagree about rape. We don't disagree that rape is horrific, evil. We've got to do everything we can to stop it. We've got to do everything we can to give the best care to women who have experienced that. You and I agree on that. It seems like where we disagree is how to evaluate, is the unborn human like the infant, or is it very different? And it seems like there are many differences, but there are also many similarities between the unborn and us. So the differences, I mean, you pointed out they seem very different, right?
It's a clump of cells.
Right, they have fewer cells than we do. They're very small.
All right, pause.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna debrief this conversation here, going through the 4 steps of agree, apply, ask why. So at the beginning of the conversation, I shared my concern with you that if women are in poverty, they should be able to get an abortion.
Right.
What was going through your mind during the agree step?
So I see this person that I'm talking to not as my enemy. I see this person as someone very much like myself. How many of you believe things that are false? I do. I just wish I knew what they were. Then I wouldn't believe them anymore. But that puts me in a posture not like this, against Kristina. It puts me in a posture like this, looking at the problem out here together, because we're both in the same boat. We both have a lot of false beliefs, and we're trying to get closer to the truth together. So that's my posture that I want to communicate to Kristina. It turns out that has a lot of practical benefit, right? It builds rapport. But it also treats Kristina like a human being, like myself. It's the right thing to do.
Yeah, and I know that from my pro-choice character, I was a little surprised that you found common ground with me. I expected you to write off exactly what I just said, but instead, you actually sat with it.
Yeah.
Now, we moved on to apply. This is where you applied my concern to a 2-year-old toddler and asked, would that justify killing them? And what is something that you are trying to convey when you go to the apply step to the pro-choice person?
I'm trying to make this concrete for you. Like Flannery O'Connor talks about in her writing, trying to always make things concrete for the audience. That's why we use pictures. That's why we put our hand out here. Imagine I have a 2-year-old here, and his mother's very poor, so we're trying to help the person visualize and connect with this reality.
Yeah, and that definitely helped me see, because I had never seen, a 12-week fetus, for example, before. If you would have asked me what I thought abortion, should be legal for, that picture could have actually shifted my view a little bit.
Right, and I've seen that happen. Yeah.
Now, when you asked me why, you asked why I can't kill the woman can't kill the 2-year-old in this circumstance. That was pretty obvious to me. It was because we're a human being. But that led into a really nice segue to the apply step of comparing, okay, well, if the unborn were to be human like that 2-year-old,
right,
then shouldn't we protect the unborn like we protect that 2-year-old? It helped me see that we need to talk about whether the unborn are human or not, because we actually don't disagree about poverty. Now, once we got to that step, I saw where you were going.
The A step?
The A step, yes. I saw where you were going with that, so I actually jumped onto my next concern, which was rape.
Right.
You started out by just sitting there relational with me for a long time. You actually drew out the fact that the statistic for rape and incest, as listed as one of the reasons contributing to it, is 1.5%, but rather than using that as a reason to make it seem small, you actually emphasized it, that those are 14,000 individual women. As a pro-choice person, I was shocked. Like, I actually trusted you more because you were honest about that and you were really showing it to me. Now, when we went to the apply step, you drew out 2 different women. You actually gave a parallel circumstance. So 2 women who were both raped, both became pregnant from rape. One has given birth and one's still pregnant. Why did you choose that kind of parallel story?
Sometimes putting 2 cases next to each other helps the person to compare them and think them through. So it's, again, trying to make things concrete.
Yeah, and that definitely helped me see that we don't disagree about rape. You actually don't hate women. We disagree about this really important question, are the unborn human?
I want to draw out this one other thing that happened in our conversation. You said there are many differences. Our typical approach when people say there are differences with the unborn is to jump on correcting that. But I want to take that opportunity to say, yeah, I get you. That embryo looks like a fetus looks like an orange with fungus on it. Right? I mean, look at that picture. That's what it looks like. Now, I'm not trying to dehumanize the unborn, but I'm trying to identify with what Kristina is seeing here. Then I'm going to point out the similarities. This embryo, yes, functions differently, but it is an organism, just like we're an organism. It has the same human nature we have. And they have that human nature the same, so we should treat them equally, right? That's the case I'm going to make.
Yeah. I think this conversation could have gone on for so much longer because it was so
I agree.
relational and helpful. Steve, I want to ask you, what is one next step, though, that everyone here can take right now?
Yeah, they can go to this website, jfaweb.org/summit23. Give us your email address, and we'd love to send you free resources, including a copy of this Invitation to Dialogue brochure and some stories from trainers like Kristina using these tools, and then also our Love 3 interactive online course is with a live trainer, so we'd love for you to sign up for that. We'll send you information about that if you just give us your email address.
All right, thank
Kristina?
you so much, Steve. Now, as you continue learning at all your sessions today, I want you to remember that whatever form of activism you're in, we need to include love in every one of our conversations with every person who we're talking to at every moment, right? This includes the unborn child, the person who has had an experience with an abortion, and the person you disagree with who's standing right in front of you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you both.